Hello, Otafest listeners. Welcome back to our Otafest podcast. We tricked ya. You thought we'd be back last week, but we weren't. Ha
I'm so sorry.
We have exploited your
I
loyalty.
can't believe we
And
did
in
such
return,
a thing.
we're giving you a podcast this week.
We broke a lot of hearts last week.
This is the apology cast.
An apology cast.
We just couldn't make some things work, unfortunately, so we were not around to be able to record. But here we are, another podcast, another week, with Nancy, Angelo, and myself, Jay.
I'm Jay.
I'm Jay.
I'm Nancy. And Angelo.
We're all Jay on this blessed day.
Welcome to J Day. And with me are some announcements.
Continuing on with our creator guests, who are also moms, please welcome Vivid Vision to Otafest 2024. Vivid Vision is an avid cosplayer with over 20 years of cosplay experience. Since childhood, she has had an interest in Japanese anime and culture. She has immersed herself in the artistry of costume design and creation, and is heavily involved in the anime community, and traveled to numerous anime and video game conventions internationally. She's been invited as a designer 3 times to showcase her costumes at Western Canada Fashion Week, and recently had her first adorable daughter in May 2023. She's learning the ropes and challenges of being a content creator along with a little one. Along with being the owner of a food-themed apparel business, Noms, she continues her creative adventures, now with a player 3 in the family. Perfect for Mother's Day.
So adorable. I can't wait. And welcome back to Brendan Hunter, Alberta's favorite curly mustached voice acting son. You've heard Brendan's voice in such animes including Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball GT and Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter. Brendan's been dubbed the worst villain in gaming, as villains have been a specialty in Brendan's acting career. He is the kind lead voice acting teacher on closingcredits.com, and he's also been Otafest auctioneer for the last 2 years, and it wouldn't be Otafest without Brendan. So make sure you see Brendan in action at this year's charity auction, and let's raise some monies for Mamas for Mamas. Good times. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited for the guest this year.
As you should be. Every
As
year.
you should.
The winter anime season has just come to a close. And my god, what a close it has been. For any of you guys watching Frieren, I know that it was in our anime review episode, or preview episode, and we'll be gushing about it again whenever we do a review episode. But the final episode just aired a day ago, as of recording. And Nancy and I have been on the edge of our seats with this anime every single week. It is so good.
It's so, so good. It is remarkably well balanced because it's not just action all the time. It's not just slice of life all the time. It's not just character and world building all the time. It is just this immaculate, delicate balance. And they just pull it off so well. Angelo was just telling me that he almost thinks this is better than its original material.
I do. So I'd read the manga for about 2 years before now. And I loved the manga. I was almost worried about the anime because I was like, how are they going to live up to this? Is it going to be a Berserk 2016 moment? God, thank God, no. Thank God, no. It is a perfect adaptation. I don't think it could have been animated better. There is literally points in the anime that hit harder than in the manga, that feel more impactful than in the manga. Like, they've added some material, and it's all amazing. It is all so good. Oh my god. It is impossible to gush enough about how wonderful of an anime Frieren is.
So in the previous, I would say like 6 or 7 seasons, anything I've chosen to watch, I've always noticed that the first 2 episodes have amazing, amazing animation. And then it kind of dips off for a little bit, and then the quality comes back towards like the end of the season, if you make it that long on the show. Frieren has been consistently beautiful the whole way throughout. I am never taken out of the show by the fact that, oh, the eyes look kind of weird, someone else must be animating the scene, or like, oh, the perspectives look kind of weird on that one face shot, because, you know, sometimes when they animate like a character turning their head, there's like moments where it's super janky before it settles into the right keyframes. And
To be
like,
fair, rotation animation is hard as hell.
and none of that happened in this show. There were never moments where something was just clearly cut cornered.
It's just, it is so clear that everybody involved with the anime loved it and was having a great time doing it. Like, it is, the passion for the project comes through so strong.
And it was just such a good ride. The music was amazing. Like, the music is, it's very low-key music. It's very fantasy music. Like, it's exactly the kind of music I would expect to show up in a fantasy show, but it's no less impactful than something that's got like a grand sweeping orchestra like Lord of the Rings. It's just right. It's everything about it is just right.
And that's kind of the whole point. That is kind of the point of Frieren. Even in the very last episode, it was kind of hammering home that it's not always about big things, you know? It doesn't matter that the hero Himmel defeated the demon lord and the demon General Bose and this hell dragon and all of this other things. It's about like the small acts, the small, like, helping people out with a daily chore and doing all this other stuff. It is a comfy anime about small things, small acts of kindness.
And how much it impacts people throughout the world.
Yeah. Oh,
And it feels so good.
it's just, if you haven't watched it yet, you owe it to yourself to watch it.
Oh, yeah.
And then to read the manga.
Oh, yeah.
Because all I'm going to say, I hope that it gets more anime.
Pretty sure
it
they just
doesn't
announced
need to.
another season for it.
Oh, did they? Did
I
they?
hope so. I hope I wasn't like deluding myself or like having a hallucination.
Because there is this one wonderful short bearded mage in the last arc called Denken. He gets a larger role in a later arc, and I just love that tiny, wonderful grandpa mage. He's so fucking perfect.
Yeah, you know what? I wasn't expecting that. And as someone who didn't read the manga, I was not expecting Denken to be that person.
Oh, he starts off as kind of a jerk, right? You think he's
Yes.
like this cold, calculating, like, asshole,
Yes.
and then you're like, wait a minute, no, he's kind of a snuggy bear. He's kind of a little sweetheart.
Yeah, and you don't expect it. You just don't expect it.
Oh,
It's crazy.
it just has a way of characterizing all of the characters and making them so lovable.
They're not two-dimensional either. I'm actually very shocked at how much time they spent on not the main party.
Yes, and a lot of that time, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I read that part of the manga, but a lot of that characterization is anime original.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting. So it's actually deeper than what was delved into by the manga.
And quite frankly, in the manga, a lot of those characters get expanded on a little bit later than the Class A mage test that we just watched.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it was pulled from there, but there's still there's a lot more. There's a lot more, and I just love it. It's so good.
Amazing.
It is.
As
This is
always.
one of those anime that's still going to be talked about in 20 years. The way that we're talking about like Cowboy Bebop every now and then, that's how Frieren is going to be in 20 years.
Yes, I agree. Like I'm going to be talking about this show for a very long time.
We'll be gushing about it in our retirement home.
The only thing I have to contribute is that I was at a friend's birthday party last week, and their birthday party had, I don't know, what do you call it? Like, they kind of, like, you know how cakes now you can have, like, a digital
topper?
print
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I know what you're talking
of
about.
an image? Yeah.
Yes.
And it was
yes.
Frieren. And I was like,
Nice.
I know that anime.
I know that reference.
Potato-faced elf.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Wonderful.
Okay, if I'm going to have a Frieren face on like a cupcake or something, it has to be the one where she's not happy about something. It's the one where she's got like the two, just like, it looks like you just took a pencil and you just sort of scratched something out. Yeah, and then it's just the scratched out eyes. It has to be that, like the slightly derpy face.
Why would you want that as a birthday cake instead of just the
'cause that's a mood.
30-pound pile of meat?
Cause Friren's derp face is like a mood for me.
Yes.
It's knowing and accepting that you have to go do something you don't actually enjoy and don't want to do, but you know you have to do it.
Fair. Valid. But going from one of the highest peaks of nerd media to one of the lowest chasms, Dragon's Dogma 2 came out, and everybody thought that was a bad idea.
For those of us who aren't super familiar with this franchise, please tell me more about why this wasn't wanted and why it was so awful.
I mean, the game was wanted.
Everybody wanted the game. Dragon's Dogma was pretty well regarded. This game, though, on the other hand, it seems to have had the claws of bean counters or the claws of execs dug into every part of it. Not only was it a buggy mess, not only was it a very low performance game, a lot of what you expect in any kind of game was cut out and added as a microtransaction.
Oh my God, actually?
One of the most damning evidence was there was an interview with one of the game designers where they were talking about how, fast travel actually, like going from one part of the map to another, that takes a lot out of the experience, you know? You don't get to experience the world. You don't get to see the world. Maybe you won't be thrust into some little nook and cranny where you find some really interesting stuff. And to be fair, that is a valid argument. Like, if you just fast travel everywhere in Skyrim, you would miss a lot. The catch is, in Skyrim, you still have to walk somewhere the first time. Mm-hmm. And then, in this 15-year-old game, you can fast travel to anywhere you want. That's perfect. In Dragon's Dogma 2, it turns out they didn't remove fast travel. It's still there. It's just that you have to buy a consumable warp gate item for like $2 or $3 so that you can place a fast travel node somewhere on the map.
For the record, aside from performance issues, and performance issues is kind of like whether your computer is up to snuff more than it is like an absolute buggy mess. Like, this game is maybe like Baldur's Gate 3 Lite. It's a very good game. It's a good experience, but it's just like a tedious, annoying approach to video game design. And like, imagine if you were playing Baldur's Gate 3, but there were story characters that you had to purchase. Or something like that.
My
like,
God.
that would suck, right?
Yes.
That's kind of like, that's kind of what it is. Maybe not like, or maybe not story characters, but maybe extra characters or something. It just would feel incomplete. And the argument is like, why are you making like a video game that is a single player experience feel like you like why can't we just release full games anymore?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Like,
basically
I
it.
very deliberately brought up the example of Skyrim. Like, Skyrim, as much as I don't want to believe it, Skyrim is an old game now. Skyrim came out like
Yeah.
14, 15 years ago? Was it 2009 or 2010? I can't remember. But it is an old game. And when it came out, people liked it, but it was rightfully criticized for having low performance, for having bugs, for being an unfinished mess.
Mm-hmm.
And even that had fast travel. Even that had all of the characters there available, fully voiced even, which is more than can be said of something like that Gollum game from a year ago or something like that, where you had to buy the voice acting as a DLC.
Oh no.
Imagine if your voice was a DLC, Nancy.
And not only that, in the case of Skyrim, if you bought it 14, 15 years ago and you played the game, you still have the save files. The save files are on your computer or backed up through Steam Cloud or on your console, right? Apparently with Dragon's Dogma 2, your characters and your save games are server-side. So if Capcom ever decides that they want to stop supporting this awful game, if they want to no longer support Dragon's Dogma because it's not making money anymore, because nobody buys it anymore because it was a bad game, the ability to save games and characters is gone. It is a single player game that can't be played offline. SimCity 4 showed how awful of a thing that was. Like, this is
Imagine
bad.
if you were playing tabletop gaming like D&D, but the DM took your character sheets after every session, and you couldn't
That's a pretty good comparison.
Yeah.
couldn't just take your character sheet and go to a different campaign even and play a second campaign with your own character that you created. That would be
Who's been
weird.
through other adventures.
And if the DM just decides to disappear one day, just decides, I don't want to play D&D anymore, your character is gone forever.
Yeah, that sounds like a whole lot of BS.
Whose ideas were these? Who let these go through? What person over at fucking Capcom was like, you know what would be a great idea? A bad game.
I just
It
I
takes
just
the
don't
words out of our
understand
mouth.
why. I just don't understand why game design. I'm not saying it's completely trending this way. Like, this is one game out of thousands that don't do this. I just don't understand why it even has to be this way. Like, why? When was the switch flipped to not to for game designers to be like, instead of charging them $5 more for the full game experience, we'll just sell them a game that has
So
less
I do
of that
have-
experience.
I can actually say something about that. Around 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, maybe like 15 years ago, something weird happened. Gaming became a larger business, a larger industry than even the movie business, even a Hollywood, you know? It is a lot of money going through gaming. Now, companies need that year-over-year growth. How do you go from the largest media industry to a larger media industry? It's understandably very difficult to keep growing once you are the biggest thing. Where are you going to pull in more customers from, right? When you have all the customers.
You start cannibalizing your own clients.
That's the thing. They have to start charging more or getting more money out of what they have. And gaming has done that in a couple different ways. there are free-to-play games that will charge you as much for a single skin in the game as you used to pay for an entire game.
Yep.
Like Fortnite and Overwatch. The skins in those games aren't cheap. Valorant, a gun skin, a single skin for a single gun can be $20. It doesn't matter if you didn't pay for the game. If you want one gun for the entire roster, you're paying like $200. Like, fucking Christ, it's expensive. It is a big way that a lot of money is being extracted.
$200 for context can buy me a very nice winter jacket.
It can buy an espresso machine.
It can buy a lot of things that are worth more to me than a skin.
And it's not just big AAA games. Even like cell phone games are like that. If I want to go buy a skin for a character in Nikkei so I can look at a different version of their booty on screen, it's going to cost me $30 Canadian to do that.
I love that you called it that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is happening to the world?
Now, in this case, in this situation, single-player games have been at a disadvantage because people want to show off their skins online, right? If you're paying $30 for a skin, what's the point if you can't flaunt it like a Rolex watch?
Oh my god. I guess, yeah, all right.
And so offline games like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3, how do you throw microtransactions into that? Dragon's Dogma 2 says, well, take away the things.
Take away vital parts of the game, apparently.
Take away local saves so that they have to buy the game. So that when we kill this version of the game and we re-release it on something else, they have to buy the something else version too.
I hate it.
It's just, why? It's bad.
It further cements the whole you don't own anything anymore.
Yeah.
Like not owning physical media at one point wasn't that bad. And then you started realizing what not having physical media meant, because it meant that they had a lot of power to take away a lot of things for you, including game saves.
I mean, a really classic example of that now is Silent Hill's PT.
Yeah. You can't play that anymore. You straight up can't play
No,
it.
it's gone.
There are from what I've heard, there are like, what is it? It came out on PS3?
Yeah, it came out as a demo
Yeah.
on the PS3. It was a free
Yeah.
demo, and it was
They pulled it
effectively
from the market, though, so if you don't have
Yeah.
it installed on a PS3, you can't play it.
Yeah. And
there's
if
just
you
no
had
way.
it installed at the time and you were still connected to the internet, then they've disabled your the PT software and you can't access it anymore. There are, as I've heard, PS3s that are being sold on like eBay, for example, that still have PT on them,
Yeah,
and they're sold for exorbitant prices.
indeed. They are.
Yeah. Now I have to wonder if there exists PT ROMs, because PS3 emulators are a thing and they're not that bad.
There's
But
an idea.
because PT was never like released on a disc or physical copy, because everything was already like installed to the PS3, I wonder if people have been able to dump those files. I don't know. I feel like it's probably possible, but I might just be optimistic.
And I know this
But
is
yeah.
not the best like analogy because PT was a free demo. It's not exactly the same thing as
Well, if you
paid
want
for the
something
software.
that if you want something more concrete, the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World game, again on the PS3, was a paid game. It wasn't free. And once the music licenses ran out, after like a year or a year and a half or something, it was delisted and you couldn't buy it. You couldn't play it. You couldn't get it back. It was
That
only
sucks.
very recently, like
That it was re-released.
I think it was last year, the game was re-released. And a lot of the music was removed. Like, they didn't get the licenses back. They just said, well, we can't get the licenses, so fuck it.
And they probably just re-released because of the new series.
That's exactly why. Now, quite frankly, it's better that we have it at all. but it isn't the original version of the game.
Hmm.
All this talk about anti-consumer practices is getting me heated. All
Wow.
of this shenanigans treating people like they don't own their products is getting me angry. And I'm not
Angry?
the only one. The U.S. Department of Justice is feeling a little bit miffed, mildly irritated, somewhat incensed by
Enough,
Apple.
in fact. Yes, enough, in fact, to sue Apple for monopoly practices.
Oh
For-
my god.
I don't understand. Apple doesn't even own Monopoly.
I know. Isn't that like Hasbro or Milton Bradley or something? I don't know.
Yeah, that's not even their IP. The Department of Justice needs to really sort out their own shit.
But Apple, man, I'm so happy about this. I hate
It was
Apple.
a long time in the coming. It was a long time in the baking, and the lawsuit against them is like 86 pages long, and it details all kinds of practices. I know, like 2-3 years ago, we talked about this on podcast where the App Store, Apple takes like a 30% cut of any transaction that is made through the App Store. So if you buy an app, if you make a microtransaction through it, they take 30%. And some very big names tried to circumvent that by saying you could also just, go to our actual company site and pay for it.
Yeah.
And they got in trouble. Apple actually tried to counteract that and say, no, you're breaking the terms of service, so we're just going to delist you from the App Store. That counts as an anti-consumer practice.
You know what's so funny about this? I just remembered this.
What?
Did you know? So for the longest time, for almost the entire existence of the iPhone, it has been impossible to sideload an app.
Yes, 100%.
Normally. That is now possible, actually. But only in the EU. Only if you
course.
bought your phone in the EU, only if
Of
you have an
course.
EU iPhone iCloud account. If you're in the US, you can't sideload apps. And this is
Yeah,
part of the
the-
whole thing.
The EU has much better competitive practices. Like they're very, a lot of the times, especially with tech companies, they fight them on so many like
Data privacy, data security.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
The EU is a much better place to live.
Free and open environment for consumers to have choices, for one thing.
But to go into it, some of the practices that Apple's been taking part in, not only is the walled garden approach to the App Store, where to even get onto the App Store, you have to give away effectively 30% of your revenue.
Yeah.
You have to really get down to some very restrictive rules. For example, did you know that it is impossible to have a separate browser on Apple, on an iPhone? Now, people would say, wait a minute, no, I can go into the App Store and I can download separate browsers. All of those browsers are just reskinned Safari.
That is horrific.
Yes.
Interesting.
Those are all just containers around the browser and the browser API Apple already supports. Like, you can't get a separate browser. It is the same one. It is just a different look. If you want to sideload an app, for the longest time, again, you had to either jailbreak and remove your warranty or give up. In the EU, that's allowed. In the EU, you can do that now. That only changed like a week ago. And the US is looking at that. It's like, wait a minute. It's possible. You made it so that you can do it. They can do it over across the ocean. Why can't we do that? What are
Because
you
we
doing
don't-
to us?
Because North America isn't as strict as the EU when it comes to things like consumer protections.
Yes. And then it even comes down to messaging. So take iMessage, for example. Famously, if you iMessage another Apple user, another iPhone user, you get the blue pop-up, right? You get the blue pop-up. Oh, but if you happen to message somebody with the dreaded Android, you get the green pop-up. And why does that matter? Why does that matter? It doesn't, except
it kind of does.
If you message someone who isn't using iCloud, that whole messaging group, so all the people in on that messaging chain, are brought down to MMS standards, so multimedia texting. That means that no attachment can be more than, I think, 300 kilobytes, which is
ridiculous.
A very small amount. It means that each message
very
can only
pixelated
hold
photo.
like a few, like, what is it, 150 characters, like almost like a Twitter amount's worth. An old Twitter amount's worth.
Your conversation is unencrypted.
Unencrypted, yes, that too. Although, personally, I always doubt that when it comes to Apple. Regardless, like, because of Apple's bullshit methods, as soon as you bring an Android person into a group, the actual message quality and communication quality goes down. And
for
you think,
everyone in the group.
Well, that's just because Android obviously doesn't support iMessage. Why
Then
don't
let
they?
them.
Except there is an open standard.
There's
an
It's
open
called
standard
RCS.
called RCS.
And Google's been pushing for it to be adopted by everyone. And Apple has famously refused for years to adopt it because it threatens the integrity of iMessage, or iMessage is better than RCS, or some very unfounded opinion. But that has been their defense the entire time.
What it comes down to is everything that is wrong with Apple, everything that is like a detriment of Apple, that they show, oh, well, look how much better we are than Android, is in reality Apple refusing to work with anything non-Apple.
Yes.
And that
so
just means, like, sorry, go ahead.
Apple's response to this lawsuit was something along the lines of, this lawsuit threatens our very identity as Apple, or something like that. And it's because their entire approach to the Apple ecosystem has always been walled garden. If you don't play by our rules, you're not allowed to play at all. And this comes through in one other really big spot in this lawsuit, which is you can't use the NFC chip on an iPhone unless you give all of your payment details to the Apple Wallet. If you are not giving your payment details to Apple Wallet, you can't use anything else to pay with tap on your phone. So that's an exemplary example of the walled garden, because you aren't allowed to use this chip that is on your phone unless you use Apple Wallet. So if you don't want to give your banking info, your payment details, everything to Apple Wallet, let's say you already have everything with, like, the Google Pay, for example. First of all, I don't think Google Pay is even available on the App Store.
Nope.
Second of all, it just wouldn't work. You are not allowed access to the NFC chip for tap if you aren't going through Apple Wallet.
You know what's even funnier about that? When Apple Pay first became a thing, they weren't even using NFC for it. They were using a proprietary hardware.
Yes.
So once NFC tags started being a thing, iPhones couldn't use them. They either the hardware had to double up the NFC and the other Apple proprietary hardware, or iPhones just wouldn't work with it.
Yep.
Eventually, I believe, iPhones just started using NFC because it was the clearly better option for all parties involved. But it was tooth and nail. It was a struggle to make them do it. The same thing with USB-C. I don't believe an iPhone with USB-C has been released yet, but
It has.
Has it?
Okay. The iPhone 15 Pros. Only the Pros, not the regular iPhone 15.
So that came out because, again, the EU regulated that all devices have to use USB-C.
Yeah, must use a universal standard must use like a non-proprietary plug, basically, is what it was. And the Lightning port has been around for goodness knows how long. I think like since the iPhone 6 or something.
No, since the iPhone 4.
Oh, since the 4, sorry. So,
or no, was it the iPhone? No, it was the iPhone 5, I think. Sorry.
It's one of the really early iPhones.
I was working when they swapped from the 30 pin to the Lightning port.
Oh wow.
Good God, people hated that.
Oh.
Oh yeah. Now, everybody agrees that the Lightning port was better.
Okay.
Except iPhone and iPod docks at that point in time were so common. A lot of people wanted the docks where you plug your iPhone onto it. It sits there. It's charged. It does its thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you went from a 30-pin dock to a new iPhone, you had to get this $40 little adapter that just sat between them.
Oh,
increased the dock height by like an inch, so it legitimately wouldn't work with a lot of hardware devices.
Inch?
Oh yeah, it was a chonky lad.
Holy.
And the reverse was basically impossible. If you had something with a new dock and you wanted to use an old iPhone or an old iPod on it,
Oh no.
get bent. You can't.
Oh no.
Buy a new iPhone. Buy a new iPod.
Yikes. But I mean, so the reasoning around allowing USB-C connectivity to be available on Pro devices for Apple, like the way that they logicked around this, is because as a Pro device, chances are you will need to connect your device with, like a camera, for example. Like I have a
Or
Sony
a display.
camera. Yeah, or a display, or, like a high-speed SD card reader, or, stuff. Like all of these different professional peripherals. And I know I'm picking on like photographers as a specific demographic here, but it applies to a whole lot of different creative industries. So photographers, you're going to have a camera. You might have 3 cameras actually, because if you're running a job, you're probably running like 2 or 3 bodies anyway. And then you'd be like offloading some of those onto your phone for social media posts, for really quick edits to send off to your clients, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of stuff that you do, and you need your phone or your laptop for it. And therefore, all Pro devices had USB-C connectivity. So like your iPad Pro, your iPhone Pro, if you had a MacBook Pro, all of those have USB-C and interface very well with USB-C. And then everybody else kind of just gets stuck with Lightning port or whatever. Like the weirdest thing about the Apple Pencil is that the non-Pro version of the Apple Pencil has a Lightning dongle on the end of it. You take the eraser lid off of the back of the pen and you put it in your iPad to charge.
God.
Imagine your
That's amazing.
iPad and then just like having a whole pencil sticking out of it charging.
Yeah. Imagine how easy it would be to break.
Yeah, it is not the best thing in the world. Anyway,
all I want to say is I wish Apple a very pleasant lose. Get wrecked.
we hope for better consumer practices that
May the
don't
DOJ
promote.
chop you up into 10 different companies.
I just really want this ecosystem to not be so closed. Like,
Yeah.
I've talked about this before. I've been using an iPhone by my own personal choice because I wanted a small smartphone and they were the only ones making it until this year, where the smartphone of a small size just died. The Zenfone is no longer making their mini, and iPhone dropped their mini last year. So I no longer have a smartphone that is this comfortable size for my puny little hands.
The
ever
smallest
again.
phone you can get now is the size of your face.
Yeah, it's true. That's very true. Anyway, I have been using the iPhone of my own choice for the last 2 years, and I miss Android. I miss it a lot. There's a lot of things I missed about it immediately. Like a visceral, I regret kinda doing this switch. There are a lot of things I appreciate about the walled garden approach. High vertical integration means that you have full control over how well all of your devices play together and how all of your services play together. That has been a phenomenal experience. But that's just because I have an Apple Watch. If I had a non-Apple Watch, it wouldn't even play well with this phone.
Yeah, no. Like, it is, Apple uses their position not just to make their devices work good, but explicitly to make every other device work
Perform badly. Like they almost go out of their way to make the experience bad for you if you are not using a full Apple ecosystem.
Now, you think, but hey, well, just stick with Apple. That's fine, right? Apple Silicon has unpatchable security risks. I didn't know about this. Tell me about it, Nancy.
So this was something that just popped up in my news feed a couple days ago. It turns out Apple Silicon, at the very least, the M1 chips. I'm not sure about the 2 and the 3, but M1 chips have they have data prefetching algorithms that try to predictively preload things to make them faster for you. And what gets prefetched can be leaked into something else that is currently observing the full fetching. So if you're fetching things like security keys,
so
those get leaked.
interesting.
This
That
is actually
happened to Intel and AMD.
Yes, so this is something that actually harkens back to Intel and AMD from about 5 years ago, where predictive data prefetching had the exact same security flaw, and this isn't patchable because this is part of how the hardware works.
Yes. If I remember correctly, what Intel had to do, they had to update the microcode that runs on the processor, the microcode that runs on the hardware itself, that controls the hardware. And for affected devices, it was a performance hit of up to 25% in many types of workloads.
So the only way they'll be able to fix this will likely create a negative effect on your performance. And the only thing you can do right now, if you have a machine with an M1 chip, is to just be really careful what software you're running on it right now.
Yep.
Because you could be running something that is passively observing everything that's being prefetched, and it will just have wide open access to any security keys, anything that's supposedly secure and should be encrypted. It'll just be available to it. So as a warning to the wider tech group that listen to the podcast, please be really careful with your M1s.
And because that's a architecture of the silicon itself kind of problem, just because it's proved on the M1 means it's very likely to exist on the M2 and the M3. Like, that, for example, when that exact same vulnerability affected AMD and Intel, that went back to their processors to the 90s.
Oof.
Basically, when that sort of prefetching, pre-caching technique was first used, it had that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if and when, maybe when, but if Apple can patch this security vulnerability, it will most likely affect your performance. Like, the M1 chips are super performant.
It is.
The 2 and the 3 are even more performant on top of it, but the M1 specifically is probably going to take like a 30-40% performance hit.
I give Apple a lot of shit because they deserve it. If you don't think they do, if you think they don't deserve it after the last 20 minutes of what we've been talking about, you're wrong. They make cool things. The M1, the M2, the M3, those are legitimately fantastic ARM processors.
They are amazing.
There's a lot of other things wrong with those MacBooks. They are so locked down, you basically don't own them. But
And if you're okay with that, okay.
the hardware itself is good.
It's true.
But now you just have to buy something else if you want to be secure.
Yeah.
Fuck Apple.
Yeah, it's very not good, for sure. The security vulnerability. The anti-consumer practices, though, like, everyone's kind of been aware about this since the beginning of time, the beginning of Apple.
May the
not a
DOJ
surprise.
lawyers be bloodthirsty and the Apple lawyers' pants be wet.
Oh, what a good spot to sign off, Angelo.
Yes.
And with
Thanks
that,
for listening.
Bye bye.
see you next week.